What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman, host of the Tru-ID podcast. And I just want to take a couple seconds to answer a two-part question that I get all the time, which is, what is urban apologetics and why do we need it? So let's go ahead and dig into it right quick. All right, so first things first, let's break down what we mean when we speak of apologetics, particularly Christian apologetics. We can trace our usage of the word apologetics back to the Greek word apologia, which simply means to give a defense for something. Biblically speaking, we find this word apologia used in 1 Peter 3:15, where it says, "But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." Now, there's a whole lot that could be said about that verse right there. But the part that I want to key in on is how vitally important it is for Christians to be prepared to respond to objections to or questions about Christianity. For example, what do you say when somebody asks, how do you know that God even exists? What evidence do you have for that belief? If God does exist, why is there so much evil and suffering in the world? What evidence is there outside the Bible that Jesus existed? Or the Bible contradicts itself, so why should anybody believe it? Now, these are all good questions. And for the sake of being effective representatives for the gospel, I'd say these are the kinds of questions that we ought to equip ourselves to be ready for. As a matter of fact, I'd say that all Christians need to have a solid understanding of the essential doctrines of Christianity, along with a few basic arguments for the biblical worldview. And actually, I'd say that they need to take time to practice them so they'd be able to explain these things to others.
Practice?
Well, yeah, practice.
Practice?
Yeah, practice.
It ain't about that. We're in here talking about practice.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to defend the faith, but if you have access to some reliable apologetic resources and, kind of practice how to communicate these things to others, then you'll find yourself becoming pretty effective. I mean, so practice, right?
We're talking about practice.
Look, the fact of the matter is, according to 1 Peter 3:15, which we just read, all of us believers are supposed to be ready to give a defense for the hope that lies within us. Now, we can either take that scripture seriously or not. I can't tell you how many times I get emails or messages on Facebook from somebody telling me about that spouse, sibling, or friend that grew up in church just like they did and now wants nothing to do with Christianity. Or maybe they've got that cousin who's getting into some other religion and they want to know how to respond to their objections so that they can help that family member navigate through some difficult questions and see the answers that Christianity has to offer. You never know when you might find yourself in that situation. So practicing how to engage people's questions about and objections to Christianity can really pay off. As that saying goes, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. But in addition to that, though, I say that Christian apologetics can play a valuable role in the life of the believer as well, as you study about, God, his nature, what he's done or is doing in creation, and how he created the world to function. And with all that being said, while there's no shortage of people asking whether or not God exists, can the Bible be trusted, and so on, these aren't the only kinds of objections and questions that Christians need to be ready for. You see, I like to think about apologetics as being kind of like music. In music, you've got different genres. You got, rock and roll, jazz, the blues, gospel, hip hop. Yes, that was a picture of a much younger, cooler, and slimmer me from when I used to rap back in the day. But anyway, in the same way that you've got various types of music, there are genres and branches of apologetics that correspond to the diversity of questions and concerns that people have when it comes to Christianity. So in terms of what we're covering in this video, this is where the word urban comes into play. Now, first I want to say up front, I think that the term urban apologetics is somewhat of a misnomer. If the two words in that phrase, urban apologetics, are taken at face value, I really don't think that it captures what people mean when they refer to urban apologetics, in the sense that, we're not talking about, just apologetics in the city or something, geographical or something like that. My take on it is when we speak of urban apologetics, we're referring to engaging the broad range of questions about and objections to Christianity that are found primarily circulating amongst people of African descent, particularly in the Western world, and to some extent, other minorities in the West. These questions and objections are generally put forth by a number of alternative and, generally speaking, ethnocentric religions, worldviews, ideologies, and so forth, such as the Hebrew Israelites, the Comedics, the Moorish Science Temple, practitioners of various kinds of African spirituality, and even a specific kind of atheism that tends to take on a sort of Afrocentric flavor to it. These groups have tended to find a launching point and space to thrive in urban areas, particularly in America's Northeast. However, over time, as the internet has become the information resource and social outlet that it is nowadays, these groups and the objections that they bring to the table have been able to expand beyond the strictly urban setting. So for example, at any given time, you might be scrolling through your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or what have you, and see something like this, or this, or this, or maybe even something like this one here. Now, in other videos, I'm going to get into why I think these sorts of objections to Christianity have gained some momentum among people of African descent. But for now, I'll simply put it this way. Given that Christianity in America and the Western world more broadly has generally been presented and perceived through the lens of European culture and history, along with the fact that there were indeed those who professed to be Christians and yet participated in chattel slavery, and even in some cases misused Christianity as a tool to subjugate African enslaved persons. What we have now are those who believe Christianity to be detached from and or in conflict with who they are from a racial or ethnic standpoint. Many people are being swayed by this idea that there is a sort of Uncle Tomness to being black and Christian. Now, of course, most people don't want to be disloyal or somehow a traitor to the group that they're supposed to belong to. So the alternative and, generally speaking, ethnocentric groups like the ones I mentioned earlier, whether it be the Hebrew Israelites, Comedics, and so on, they'll often attempt to tug on the heartstrings of black Christians and persuade them that what they need to do is cast off this European Christianity and then take on some ideology or spiritual system that's in line with their African or ethnic heritage. This can also come into play with non-Christians as well, as these kinds of concerns can become a stumbling block that prevent them from being receptive to the gospel. Now, on a personal level, I can definitely relate to how these identity-related concerns can weigh heavily on you. I mean, I get it. I mean, even this video that I'm doing right now, or the Tru-ID podcast, I mean, this is all part of my personal journey of wrestling with these questions, finding answers, and now getting the word out that, based upon the evidence, we have solid grounds to affirm that Christianity itself is not the white man's religion, nor is it in any way contrary to who I am as a person of African descent. And more importantly, beyond that, we have solid reasons and evidence by which we can affirm that Christianity is true. So with all that being said, I want to invite you to check out the Tru-ID podcast, where we tackle these kinds of issues all the time. You can check us out at www.truidpodcast.com. That's truidpodcast.com, where you can actually listen to our shows there directly, or you can see some of the other outlets that we're available on, like iTunes, Podbean, Google Play, and so on. I also do a good amount of blogging as well, so you can check out my works at some of the links that I put at the end of this video, including my blog site and some of the other websites that I write for. Also, I'm pretty active as a public speaker, so for anybody who wants to bring me in for a speaking engagement, certainly hit me up at my email, truid7@gmail.com, where I take all booking inquiries. And in the meantime, man, hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm pretty active on there. Love to hear from you, engage people. If you hate something that I say, you can hit me up, or if you like it, either way, that's cool, man. And I'd also ask you to consider to support our ministry, through patreon.com/Adam Coleman. We got a lot of work to do. We appreciate all the help that we can get in getting that done. Now, again, if we want to be effective representatives for Christ, then we want to meet people where they are and then help them to get past the barriers that are blinding them from the light of the gospel. As I say all the time, as Christians, we ought to know what we believe, why we believe it, and be able to express these things to others in a way that the average person can understand where we're coming from. My goal is to be a resource to help Christians do just that. So stay tuned for more videos, podcast episodes, blogs, and so on that I pray will be a blessing to you. Till next time, love y'all, man. Peace.